Hello, everyone. This is Eleanor Rigby. I was sitting here in my favorite armchair this morning, the one with the worn out velvet that my husband, Thomas, always teased me about, and I found myself holding this small, tarnished silver locket. It doesn't look like much now, just a bit of scrap metal to anyone else. But inside is a photograph from 1952. We were so young then. I look at those two faces and I barely recognize them. They were so sure they knew everything about the world and even more about love. But standing here at 95 years old, looking back over the long, winding road of my life, I realize how little I actually understood if I hadn't learned the hard lessons, the ones that break your heart before they mend it. I would have lost everything that truly mattered. I would have died a very lonely woman. The passage of time is a strange thing. It steals your youth, but it gives you a clarity that I wish I could have whispered into the ear of that girl in the photograph. Before I tell you this story and the things I've carried with me, please subscribe. I want to pass this wisdom down before I'm gone so you don't have to make the same mistakes I did. I want these words to live on in you. When Thomas and I got married in 1949, the world felt like it was finally catching its breath after the war. We didn't have a penny to our names, just a few cardboard boxes and a shared dream of a white picket fence. I remember the smell of our first apartment. It smelled like floor wax and cheap coffee. We thought that being in love was enough to pay the rent and keep the peace. But life has a way of testing that theory. In all my 95 years, I've realized that the biggest mistakes I made weren't the things I did, but the things I didn't understand about the person sleeping right next to me. The first mistake I made happened early on back in the late 50s. I thought that my happiness was his responsibility. I can still hear my mother's voice telling me, "Eleanor, a husband's job is to make you smile." What a dangerous lie that was. I spent years waiting for Thomas to fill up the holes in my own soul when he'd come home tired from the shipyard, smelling of salt and heavy machinery. I'd be there with a list of grievances because I felt unfulfilled. I'd say, "Thomas, you never take me out anymore." Or, "Thomas, why are you so quiet?" I was looking for him to be my everything, my entertainment, my therapist, my source of joy. It wasn't until I was nearly 40 that I realized I was suffocating him. I was a sponge trying to soak up his life because I didn't have enough of my own. I promise you, if you expect your partner to be your entire world, you will both end up living in a very small, very dark place. Then came the 60s, a decade that changed everyone, including us. My second mistake was the way I handled our first real crisis. Thomas lost his job in '63, and for 6 months, the air in our house was thick with a tension you could cut with a knife. I grew cold. I thought that by being strong, I had to be hard. I stopped being his partner and started being his. Judge, I didn't say it out loud, but my silence said everything. Why weren't you more careful? Why can't you provide? I can still see him sitting at the kitchen table late at night, the yellow light of the overhead lamp casting deep shadows on his face. Staring at the bills, instead of putting my hand on his shoulder, I stayed in the other room. I chose resentment over empathy. We didn't have a penny to our names, and I made him feel like he didn't have a wife either. That was a year of silence. That stabbed. Nearly cost us our marriage, eh? I learned the hard way that when your partner is down, that is when they need your grace the most, not your lessons. By the time the 70 rolled around, we were older, but I was still making the third mistake. I was keeping a ledger. I had a mental notebook where I wrote down every time I did the dishes, every time I changed the diaper, and every time he forgot an anniversary. I thought marriage was a 50-50 split, a business transaction where everything had to be perfectly even. I did this for you, so you owe me this. Let me tell you the truth, marriage is never 50-50. Some days it's 80-20, and some days you're the one giving the 80. If you spend your life counting favors, you'll end up feeling cheated, even when you're loved. Experience has taught me that love doesn't keep a score. It's about giving when you have it, and being humble enough to take when you don't. The fourth mistake is one I see so many young people making today. I call it the grass is greener syndrome. In the mid-80s, things got boring. The kids were grown, the house was quiet, and Thomas and I just seemed to be roommates. I remember looking at other couples at the grocery store or at church and thinking they look so much happier. They're still laughing. Maybe I picked the wrong person. I started to wonder if there was someone else out there who would understand the new me. But I realized after a long, tearful talk with my older sister that the grass is only green where you water it. I was looking at other people's gardens while I let my own wither. People today throw things away so quickly when they get a little dusty or a little cracked. In my day, when something was broken, you fixed it. You didn't just go out and buy a new one. My fifth mistake was the hardest to admit. I stopped listening, not just the physical act of hearing words, but truly listening to his heart. Thomas would try to tell me about his fears of getting older, or his dreams of traveling after retirement, and I would just nod and keep knitting or looking at the television. I thought I knew everything he had to say because I'd heard it all for 30 years. But people change, even when they're standing still. I woke up one day and realized I was married to a stranger because I had stopped being curious about him. You have to stay a student of your partner. You have to ask them questions like you're on your first date, even when you're on your 10,000th. And the sixth mistake, perhaps the most painful of all, was the mistake of tomorrow. I spent so many years saying, we'll do that when we have more money, or we'll be happy when the house is paid off, or I'll tell him how much I appreciate him tomorrow. We lived our lives in the future tense. Then, one Tuesday morning in 2005, Thomas didn't wake up. Just like that, the tomorrows were gone. I was left with a house full of things we had saved for a day that never came. I realized that the life we were waiting for was the one we were already living, and I had missed so much of the beauty of it because I was looking toward the horizon. You have to understand that love isn't a feeling you have, it's a decision you make every single morning when you wake up. It's easy to be in love when the sun is shining and the bank account is full. But real love, the kind that lasts 95 years, is forged in the fire of those mistakes. Young people today, you have so much noise in your ears. You have faps that tell you there's always someone better just a swipe away. You have movies that tell you love is all about the grand gesture and the passionate kiss in the rain. But let an old woman tell you love is mostly about who is going to hold the bowl. When you're sick at 3 in the morning, it's about who is going to stay when you're not very likable. Modern dating seems so much like shopping, but a human soul isn't a commodity. Patience, sacrifice, and loyalty, those aren't just old-fashioned words. They are the bricks that build a home that can withstand any storm. You have to be willing to be wrong. You have to be willing to be the first one to say, I'm sorry, even when you think you're right. In all my 80 years of being an adult, I've found that being kind is much more important than being right. I look at this locket now, and I don't see two perfect people. I see two flawed, stubborn, beautiful souls who refuse to give up on each other. We made so many mistakes, but we made them together, and that made all the difference. My late husband used to say that a good marriage is just two people who take turns being strong for each other. He was right. We weren't perfect, but we were loyal. Think about that. Think about the person you're with, or the person you're looking for. Are you looking for a fantasy, or are you looking for someone you can grow old and wrinkled with? Are you prepared to forgive the unforgivable? Because you will have to. I want you to be happy, truly, deeply happy. But that happiness doesn't come from a life without mistakes. It comes from the wisdom you gain when you crawl through the wreckage of those mistakes and decide to keep building. Don't wait until you're 95 to realize that the most precious thing you own is the heart of the person who chose you. Thanks for listening to Old Soul. Subscribe, share this with someone you love, and cherish them while they are here. Life is a lot shorter than it feels when you're young. Make sure you leave nothing unsaid. Good night, and God bless. Would you like me to create a set of reflective discussion questions based on this script to engage your audience in the comments section?